Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. We are on enumeration. So we are probably about halfway done with the red team path, I think. I'm going to try and pump out some of these videos quicker that are going a little bit faster. Some of the videos were taking a long time, so that's why it's taking longer, because that means I have to record, edit, do all that stuff on much longer videos. So hopefully you guys are liking this content. Hopefully you guys are liking this path. I actually like this path quite a bit. I think it's really good. If you guys are, please hit that sub button. Please hit that like button. It helps a ton. Everybody that watches and doesn't sub, I know you probably think it's annoying to sub because you're going to get an alert or whatever. But I'm telling you, it's the only way our channels can grow. It's the only way we can keep doing this. So make sure you check that out. Also, in the Discord below, we are having a CTF competition in November, and that will be for a Security Plus voucher. So make sure you hop in the Discord and join that, or else you miss your chance. So let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, so enumeration. So we've already done a lot of the boxes where we've gathered information from outside the box, but now we're enumerating once we're in the box. And this is just very basic enumeration. This isn't enumerating for anything specific. They're just showing you basic enumeration that really can help you in multiple facets, not just in hacking, but also if you're a system administrator or network administrator, network engineer, any of that type of stuff, any any analyst position, any system position, really, help desk, anything. These will help you because a lot of this is command line, and it's stuff that you can actually use in your day-to-day activities, and this will help you tremendously to, let's say you just need to gather, what's the latest patch on the machine or anything like that. That stuff can help you as well. So let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, so you notice they're saying this room focuses on post-exploitation. So this means you've already taken over the machine. We already have control. So we've taken over the machine, and now here we are. So what do we do now, right? All right, so if you're interested in privilege escalation, so there is a privilege escalation room. I have both those in my channel. Check them out. They're really, really good information. But basically what's going on here is, for the first one, what command would you use to start the PowerShell interactive command line? And that is PowerShell.exe, simple command. But here we go. So the purpose of this room, when you gain a shell on the target, right, you usually have a very basic knowledge of the system. You knew it was Windows or you knew it was Linux because you took over the machine. So, or a server or whatever it was. So you know which service you exploited and you know what your nmap scans show. But that doesn't mean that's everything that's going on with that machine. And the reason I say that is nmap scans are notoriously, I don't want to say bad because they're good. They're very good, right? But they're notoriously not correct in the sense that it's not going to show you everything, and there's reasoning for that, right? You may be halfway through a scan and you get caught by an intrusion detection or intrusion prevention system, and it blocks it. It may be some packets are lost, and it's not like a TCP connection. It's not going to wait for the packet all day. It's going to say, okay, move on to the next one. So keep that stuff in mind, guys. That nmap scans are great, but once you have control of the box, you really want to know what you're working with. So you can see, consequently, the shell will look like a dark room where you have incomplete and vague knowledge of what's around you. Okay, so they're saying here, we don't know what's going on. We've taken over this machine. Someone said, let's just say someone dropped a name and password to you, and you SSH'd into a machine, so you don't know anything about that machine. That's what we're kind of assuming here. Okay, furthermore, so here's some of the things that you'd look to get, and you can read this. We're going to go through it here in a second. Furthermore, you might stumble upon sensitive data. Now, this is 100% true. A lot of people think that this isn't accurate or this doesn't happen, but I can promise you most big hacks happen because someone messed up. Someone made a mistake in that company. Now I can tell you here, the passwords.txt or password Excel file, what they're saying is a lot of people use their password managers. They don't want to pay for one, or they don't trust them or whatever, and they just put a Word document on their computer, or they have a file saved, or if you get a password manager, you can brute force it, if it's a local one. Now, all these things are things that you might find on the machine, and it could lead you to more, and that's what they're trying to show you. So in SSH key-based authentication, which does the client need? So if you don't know how SSH key basically works, you have a private key and a public key. It's how most encryption works nowadays. Now there is asymmetric and symmetric, but the way this works is basically you have public key, private key, right? The private key you keep internally, you never give it away. You have to have the public key to encrypt something to somebody. So when you send an email, you have to have that person's public key to actually encrypt it, so that only they can decrypt it with their private key. Okay, SSH works the same way, where only person that can get in is the person with the private key. Okay, and you can see in SSH key, which key does the client need? They need the private key. So their private key is their basic password, if you will, right? So if you hear private key and public key, that's what they're referring to. And you can see the public key is installed on the server. So the public key sitting on the server, it's public. Anybody can take it. It doesn't matter. But the private key is needed. It links up with the private key, and the public key, links up, and they have to work together. But the private key, you should only have it. Now, the reason I keep saying that you should only have it is because if someone gets a hold of your private key, they can just log right in as you, because that's better than a password, right? A key is, 60, 70 lines long, right? So you shouldn't ever give that away or ever make it accessible for someone, okay? So now let's go ahead and hop in Linux enumeration. We'll go ahead and start the machine as we talk about it. Okay, we already have a machine running. Okay, so Linux enumeration. We've covered this a lot on this channel. I'm a huge Linux guy. I like Linux way more than Windows, but the reality is Windows isn't going anywhere and we have to use it, okay? But let's go ahead and start talking about enumerating it, right? So first things first, we want to see what some of the system information. Now, why do you want to see this? Most of you are thinking, okay, we have the machine. We've already taken it over. What's really the point? Why would I need to get the release information? Well, let's say this. Let's say you took it over by, exploiting some really well-known exploit, like, Eternal Blue, let's just say, even though that's an old one, everybody knows it, right? Let's say you take that over. Well, you want to find out what release they're on, what operating system they're on, because there may be 50 other exploits. Why is that important to you? What happens if you look and you go through their patching system and say, okay, they patch every 2 weeks and they're going to patch tomorrow? Well, if they patch that Eternal Blue or whatever vulnerability you used, you no longer can get access. But if you realize they're on this operating system in this release version, there may be 10 to 20 different vulnerabilities that you could take advantage of, and you now know them, okay? So keep that in mind. It's to get you the more information. Information is power, okay? Especially in hacking. So that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get as much information as you can about the systems. All right, so you can see what they're doing is they're just listing everything wildcard release, so anything with the release in the name, and they're getting CentOS, operating system release, Red Hat release, system release, okay? So they go ahead and they open the operating system release, and they get some information from it. What version is it? What operating system is it? They do the same thing on Fedora, same thing, right? So Linux always has that release information. So now you can see here we have if you say the host name, this is going to be whatever the name of the computer is. Now, why might this be important? This could actually be really important if you're working on an enterprise doing a penetration test or something, because if you notice a pattern, so let's say the host name is workstation 001, right? Well, it's safe to assume at that point, if they have 500 workstations, that the next one might be workstation 002, 003, 004, right? And if they follow that pattern, you don't have to do too much enumeration, because you now have a list of workstations that you need to, or that you can either try to access or hack into, because they made a mistake and they have that pattern. Okay, so that's just one example of why you might want the host name. All right. Various files on the system can provide plenty of information. In particular, consider the following: Etsy password, Etsy group, Etsy shadow. Okay, perfect. So what you can see is, and sorry if you guys notice I'm talking funny, I have a huge open sore right there on my mouth, on my lip. So you have cat Etsy password. So if you guys don't know, the password file used to store the passwords. Now it doesn't. It just stores usernames and the home directory. So you can see here, this is what it's going to look like. You have Michael, you have their permissions, or their groups, excuse me, and then you have their home directory and what shell they spawn into. Now the groups, again, a lot of people, I won't say a lot, most people use Windows-based IAMs, identity and access management. So most people use most companies use Windows authentication, such as Active Directory, domain controllers, Azure, that type of thing. And they have Linux machines, but they don't usually use the groups in Linux machines. And I don't want to say nobody does, because some people do, obviously. But the groups in Linux machines are much harder to basically train and get everybody up to speed on. It's not very easy to teach a help desk member who has no years experience how to manage groups in Linux, but it is very easy to teach them how to click on a domain controller and say add to accounting group, right? So that's why you're not going to see a whole lot of grouping in Linux. You will see this. You notice it says Michael is in group 1001, Peter's in 2, 3, 4. That's because when you create a user in Linux, if you don't specify them belong in a group, they generate their own group called Peter, Michael, Jane, whatever. So just keep that in mind. These aren't like actual different groups, really. They just are the ones created for them. All right, so now you have the cat Etsy shadow files. So the shadow files where the passwords are actually stored. This is where you're going to see the actual hashes, and you can see that here, root, and then there's your hash, Michael, there's your hash, boom, boom, boom. So this is where you want to be careful. You don't want this information to get out, because then they can start cracking passwords. Similarly, various directories can reveal information of users and might contain sensitive data. So for instance, if you look in the mail folder, they might have mail in there. And you can see, now you can start looking at what's going on in their mail folder. Now, again, you're not going to see this as often as you think. Depends on the organization, right? And you should know, if you're doing a pen test, you should know if they're a majority Linux or a majority Windows organization. And if they're a majority Linux organization, then you might start seeing some mail in there. All right. Now, to find the installed applications, you're going to actually go into the user bin and SBin, and those are just the binaries. That's going to show you what's actually installed on the machines. On an RPM-based Linux system, you can get a list of installed packages with RPM QA. Boom, boom, boom. And you can see here the D package L. This is showing you everything that's being installed. Users. Okay, so now we've covered the Etsy password. So here's a command. You can see who's logged in using who. Now, this is not the who am I command. Keep that in mind, because the who am I command, if I type that, it just shows who I am right now. What role am I assuming, or what user am I assuming? Now, if you type who, that's going to show you everybody that's logged in. So let's say, for instance, I log in, I start doing some work, and I just exit the computer or walk away or whatever, and it goes into, like you guys are familiar with Windows, when it goes into sleep mode, right? That person's not logged off. They just aren't logged in. So when I say that, what I mean is they just need to type their password in, and their whole thing comes back up, and everything they're running is still going. So it's the same thing. These users are logged in right here, but only one of them might be using it at a time, but they're still logged in. Who am I? Like I said, just shows the one person. All right, if you type just W, you can see who is logged in and what they're doing. Now, you can see, again, I'm the only user, but you can see what they're doing. So, for instance, here is Jane, and here you go. Peter is using VI on notes.txt. So, he's actually doing something. Okay, cool. And Jane's the one that ran the W command. Okay, cool. Now, you can see here, if you type ID, we've covered this before. ID is just going to show you exactly that. It's going to show you the user ID, the group ID, da-da-da. You guys get it? Now, if you type in last, so do you want to see who's using it recently? This displays the last logged in users. So if you type in last, this shows you. Now, this is the attack box, not the machine we're looking at, so don't worry. But you're going to see it's showing who logged in, when, and then if they're still logged in. Perfect. Now, networking. So you can see here, networking, this is something you're going to be really enumerating here when you take over a machine. Why? Because we're assuming you got this machine and you don't have any knowledge of the network right now. That's the what we're assuming right here. So when that happens, we now have to figure out what's our next step. How many IPs do we have that we can take over? How many workstations, servers, all that stuff? All that begins with networking. We have to start with networking. And you can see here, they type in APAS. They get, these are the actual interfaces, the IP addresses, all that stuff. And you can see you can shorten it. That's AP address show, or they can shorten it. You can still use ifconfig, no big deal. All right, now you can see the DNS servers can be found here at etcresolve.conf or configuration. These are where you're going to specify your DNS servers. Now, we're going to get into DNS here in a minute, so I'm not going to cover too much on it. You guys should be familiar with it. Netstat, this is something you use all the time. Netstat is going to actually show you what ports and what services, programs are listening on those ports, and if they have active connections. You can see if they do, it says established. If they don't, it'll say listen, which means they're listening for someone. They're waiting to have someone connect to them. So for instance, SSH right here on port 22 is listening. It's waiting. It's saying, hey, go ahead and connect to me if you want to. Okay, so again, they're talking about in-map scans and how they're not always accurate. So this will be a better accurate representation. You can see here, list of open files. That's what this command is, list of open files, tac I. It's going to show you what files are open. Now, the benefit of this is you can go ahead and assume what applications are running and things from the open files running, because they're all executables. All right. Now you can see we have the running services. So this is where you're going to look at PS for processes, and you're going to get all the running services. This here, they're showing AXF. This is showing how it's actually into a visual forest standpoint for you. So you can see it's a process hierarchy. So you can see this one, and then this is supposed to be like a little tree branch that comes off, and it goes into this one. And you can see as it keeps progressing, you have the SSHID or SSHD, then SSHD, then SSHD, then bash, then vi notes. So you can see it's a process tree. It started with this one, and it ends up with him on notes.txt. Okay, and you can see here they went ahead and used PS tac EF to get the list of running processes, and then they piped and they asked for only Peter's running processes. Okay, so now let's go ahead and log in. So we're going to go ahead and SSH with user at 10.10.96.106. And the password is THM6877. All right, and so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go straight back up to the top. And we're just going to do this. This is going to answer quite a few of our questions. But right here, we just want to go ahead and say list. We want to list all of our Etsy, if I can type, and then the wildcard, and then release, because we want to list all the releases. So there, Etsy OS release, perfect. So now we just want to cat that file, because what we're trying to do is we're just trying to get the release information. So now when we cat it, you can see we get some good information here. So they're asking us, what is the Linux distribution? And there it is. There's Ubuntu. Then what's its version number? Right below it, version number. Perfect. Now, what is the name of the user who last logged in the system? And if you remember right here, they showed us how to check that right there. So we just type in last. And you can see there's user and Rhonda. That's the only two users that have logged in. So go ahead, Rhonda. Now, what is the highest listening TCP port? Is that what it said? Yeah, TCP port number. I knew I was missing a word there. Okay, so this one's pretty easy. All you have to do, now one thing I'll tell you guys is you're going to have to use sudo here, and I'll show you why. So we'll just go ahead and do this one here. Just following exactly what it shows us. Now, Netstat we've used a lot on this channel, so if you're not familiar with it, go back and watch some of the other videos where networking videos, and you're going to notice Netstat's a very important tool. So we're going to go ahead and hit Netstat. Now you notice it's asking for that because I use sudo, and I'll show you why I use sudo here in a second. Okay, so we have all these ports, and we just want to find the highest listening one. And you can see this one's listening right here, and that's the highest, 6667. That's the port. There it is, 6667. Now, the reason I use sudo is you notice here on the process name, if you don't use sudo, these will be blank because they don't have permission to see that. So if you have to use sudo to gain root privileges to access this right here. And the next question is asking what's the name of the program listening on it. And if you go over, it's Inspire CD. Okay, so if you notice that your programs are blank, they're all blank, That's because you didn't use sudo, you just used a regular command and you don't have permission. All right, now there's a script running in the background. Its name starts with THM. What is the name of the script? Okay, so if you remember here, we can go ahead and go back. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to say process tech ef. Now, they tell us what the process starts with. They say it starts with THM. So we don't have to do much. We can just grep it and say we just want THM, anything that starts with THM. And there you go. You got 3 total things running. And there it is, THM 24765.sh. So that is the script that is running. Perfect. So now we'll go up here. We'll terminate this machine, and then we'll go ahead and open the Windows machine. And the nice thing is they actually have Windows on here for this next one where you can SSH in. Okay, so this one is even simpler. Windows is simpler in my opinion, but not as useful in my opinion. So you can see here we have system. So the first thing we're going to do is similar to the last one, the Linux system, where we had to go in and use the release version. We want to use system info. The command system info gives us the same information, except for the Windows system will show us which hotfixes that have been installed or updates, right? These are hotfixes, so these are usually security concerns. And it'll show you the last ones installed, so you at least, the nice thing is you know right away what it's vulnerable to and what it's not. Okay, you can check installed updates using this, WMIC. Now, if you haven't used WMIC before, you're going to use it a ton on Windows over the course of your career in system administration, analysts, engineering, any of that stuff. So just be familiar with it. It can do a lot of cool stuff. So you can see here, if you use this, all they're saying is go ahead and get just the caption and just the description. They're keeping all the other information out, so that way you don't have to sit here and go through all that information. Now, you can see, you can check the install and start Windows services. So Windows, as you know, has services that you can go ahead and activate, deactivate, whatever, such as SSH, such as IIS, all that stuff. You can do net start and see which one of them is actually going and what's not. You can find out very quickly. Is the system I'm on, is it a domain controller? Is it their DNS server? What is it, right? So then you can see here, now they're using product, get name, version, vendor. So this is going to be everything installed. And you can see this. It's just going to give you just the name, the vendor, and the version. That's all they asked for, name, version, vendor. All right. And then users, you're going to say, who am I? Now, this is, the nice thing is, Linux and Windows are slowly coming together. And when I say that, a lot of Linux commands work on Windows now, and a lot of Windows commands are starting to work on Linux. And eventually, hopefully, they run where you can just use them both. But we're pretty close. So now you can use whoami/priv, and that will tell you what privileges you have. Okay, so that's really good to know. You want to know what privileges you have, so you know what you can and cannot do, especially if you're worried about getting logged. All right, now you can use whoami groups, and that's going to tell you what groups you're a part of. So if you're looking to see, am I a part of domain admins? Maybe I took over a user account, and I think maybe he's got some access that I really like. You can start doing stuff like that. So now you can use net users, and this is going to give you user accounts. You can see it's going to give you admin, Michael, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now you can discover the available groups for using net group if the system is a Windows domain controller, or net local group. So if you do net local group, that's going to show you, you can see here, they have these local permissions. You can list the users that belong to local admin group using the command net local group admin. So again, local is different than if they're on the domain. So just know the difference, but understand these commands, how they work. Because if you take over an individual machine that is just someone sitting at home, let's say you get hired to do a pen test for a really wealthy person and they only have their home network, they're not going to have a domain controller. They're not going to have all that, or very small business or anything like that. They're going to probably have local accounts. Networking, very similar. IP config, IF config was the last one we were able to use on Linux. So then you have netstat, same thing, ABNO, netstat, and it's going to show you all the listing. And you have ARP. Okay, so this one here, ARP helps you discover other systems on the same LAN. If you don't know, ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol, as it says there. But what it does is it takes the physical address, your MAC address that's actually printed on the machine, and it takes that and it gives it basically correlates it with an IP address. Now, why is this important? Because your router needs to route traffic to you. It doesn't know what computer has what IP, so you use ARP. And what ARP does is your computer says, hey, I have this IP, and it sends it with the MAC address. And so if you actually show the ARP tables, ARP TAC A like that, you're going to get, look at this. Not only do you get all the MAC addresses, but you get all these IP addresses. So you now know how many machines are on that local subnet, at least generally, right? All right, so now we need to go ahead and SSH in again to the Windows machine. So SSH user at 10.10.149.178, and we're going to say yes, and we're going to go ahead and say THM33 $88, and we're in. Perfect. So now, what is the full OS name? And you remember we just did system info at the beginning, and it's going to load, and we should see something very similar to this right here, right? And you can see there's a lot more to it than that, but yeah, there it is. So now we'll say, what is the version, the full operating system name? And there it is, OS name, Microsoft Windows Server 2019 Data Center. That is the full name. Now, what is the operating system version? And you can see the version right below it, 10.0.17763. Perfect. Now, how many hotfixes are installed? You don't even have to count them. That tells you right here, 30 hotfixes. Don't even have to count them. Now, what is the lowest TCP port number listening on the system? So for that, we're going to have to go to the netstat. We're going to say netstat, and then we're going to say ABNO. Now, keep in mind, this is going to go through all of them, all the ports so you'll see what I mean. I'm just going to, you can do like something like netstat, ABNO, and then you can do a pipe and say more, and then you can scroll through them. I just do this because I know that we're looking for the lowest, so it's going to be one of the first ones. So I just Control-C it real fast. Just go back up to the top. It's going to be the lowest one. And 22 is the lowest listening port. So that is the lowest TCP port number listening on the system. And you can see that because it goes 22, 80, 135, 445, 3389. So it just keeps going up. And you can see as you scroll through, it's going to keep going up. So what is the name of the program listening on that port? And that is SSH right here, sshd.exe. That is the name listening. And you could probably have guessed that because port 22 is notoriously SSH. All right. So now, keep in mind, we are done with this machine. All right. So now, we'll go ahead and terminate it. All right. We're familiar with DNS. All of us are familiar with DNS. Domain name system. What this does is it gives you records for IP addresses, right, to actual names. Now, why is this important? Because you should know how to do a zone transfer. Because a zone transfer, we've talked about them in the past. We've talked about them probably on 5 or 6 different videos. A zone transfer says, hey, I'll give you all my information if you give me all yours. You go to a DNS server. You give them all of your entries, which you're not a DNS server, so you don't really give them much, if anything. And then they say, sure, we'll trade you. And why do they do that? Because DNS servers need to communicate with each other so that way they can share information. It's just necessary. So if you ask for a zone transfer, there's a chance that a DNS server might give it to you. Now, why is that important? Let's say you, as a company, aren't configured correctly, and I can access your DNS server, and I can say, hey, go ahead and give me all your DNS entries. That's all your internal DNS entries, I mean. Then I can access, or I get access to all of your IP addresses and their host name for your entire company, right? So that's a problem. You don't want to give that information away. So that's what you got to be careful for, and that is what this command does. So we'll go ahead and do it. Dig tact axfr, and then we have the domain name and DNS server. Now you can see here the first question they're asking is if we know the domain name is redteam.thm, and then the server IP, okay, crap, I actually turned that server or that machine off, so we'll go ahead and go back through it. Thought we were done with it. So we'll just wait for that to come back up, and then we'll just keep talking about it. So now let's go to SMB. So SMB, so you can see server message block, communication protocol that provides shared access to files and printers. So the problem with this is SMB notoriously is vulnerable, okay? And you can see you have C, IPC, admin. These are created by default, okay? And that's fine. But you can use SMB to share files and folders across your network. Let's say you have a printer or whatever. It might use SMB to actually use that protocol to talk to each other. Now, why is that vulnerable? SMB has some very vulnerable versions. And when that happens, if you don't have updated versions or you don't have it patched and things like that, now people can start accessing these shares without permission. Why is that a problem? Well, let's say, remember we talked about some people store passwords and stuff on their folders. Let's say they have those folders out in the open and don't realize it because nobody knows what's going on. That is then accessible by the outside, by me. I take it, I get your passwords, now I'm in, right? So keep in mind, SMB is a very common way to get to access certain things you don't want them to, and look for those type of things in CTFs. Now, SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, this is a great tool. SNMP, basically what it does is it's going to get you all kinds of information about your network. So you can see it's going to tell you all about different devices on the network. It's going to let you know about various network events. So this is where you can see servers with faulty disks, printer out of ink. So basically you can see it's sending out information about the network, about devices on the network, okay? So that's good, right? You want that because you need to know that stuff, but it can be bad if you use it to your advantage. If you say, okay, well, I know this IP, blah, blah. I know all this stuff because SNMP is sending it out on the network and I'm asking for it, right? So let's go ahead and look at the IP. So now we have 10.10.21.231. So you can see we need to do the zone transfer. Here is the zone transfer command. We hit enter. Okay, perfect. And you can see there is our flag. They actually put it in there as a text entry. Flag.redteam.thm is THM DNS zone. So there you go, THM DNS zone. Now, what's the name of the share available over SMB? Well, all we got to do is say net share, and then we got to enter the root password, which I'm assuming. Oh, that's why. All right. There we go. Nope, I typed in completely the wrong thing. Okay, so now what's the name of the share available over SMB protocol that starts with THM? I was looking at the net share on my machine, which is not what you want to do. So we're looking at the ones on their machine. So let's go ahead and look. All right, so what we'll do is we'll actually go back into the machine. We'll SSH back into it. If I can find the name and password here. If we could find it. I don't know. There it is. Okay. So user at 10.10.21.231 and the password. I just hit enter twice because everything else was twice. Okay, so now we can say SMB, and we can say net share. All right, there we go. So as you can tell, I ended the Windows machine early because I thought it was just that step, but it's these steps too, I guess. So I had to go back in and get back in there. So you can see what is the name of the share over SMB protocol start with, and you can see they have a little hidden share there, and it says enjoy SMB shares. So this is and you notice that this is the actual location. It's C user private. So it's supposed to be a private share is what they're saying, and it's being sent out to everybody if they want it. That's what they're getting at. That's what they're saying. So then you go ahead and there's your flag. Knowing that the community string used by the SNMP server, so now we're looking at SNMP, is public, use SNMP check to collect. Okay, so they gave us the actual community string. So now all we got to do, pretty easy, we just got to use this command. So we say, all right, cool. We know what we need to do now. So we'll just go ahead and we can actually exit this and just do it on the attack box. So we're going to say opt SNMP check, SNMP check.rb. And we know that this is the IP. And then the community string they gave us is public. Okay. So now anything with that community string on that IP, we get information from. So you'll see it's trying to connect. Boom. And we got a bunch of information. So this shows you kind of what SNMP can give you, right? So you can see, and what we'll have to do, I'll show you, we'll have to do more on this because you can see it's giving us all that. But you can see, I want you guys to see what information you get. So you can see all the processes running. You can see storage information, file system information, device information. You can see all kinds of stuff about the system, right? So now we'll do more because we want it to go slow. We want to be able to scroll through it. And now here's the beginning of it. And you can see here, if you remember, so there's THM SNMP service. That's the location. That's what they're asking for. What is the location specified? Now, what I want to show you guys is if you actually go down, you can see you get these all the interfaces. You get a lot of information, routing tables, network IP, all the ports listing, everything. So this is a really good tool. And then you can see if you go all the way to the bottom, if you remember our SMB shares from the previous step, you actually didn't have to do that because it's down here too. So kind of interesting that the SNMP actually gives us the SMB shares as well. So it's really just one step if you want it to be. All right. So now more tools for Windows. So this one, there is no actual anything you need to do, but they're saying use sysinternal suites, process hacker, and ghost pack seatbelt. Now, I'll tell you sysinternal suite, you should be using this as a sysad or, whatever position you're at, but a sysad would use this a lot, especially troubleshooting. Process Explorer, Process Monitor, provide information about the process, PS List, PS Logged On. All these are things. The PS Logged On is, circumstantial. You're not going to always need to know who's logged in, right? But you are going to want to always be able to know where the processes are and all that stuff. And I'm sure most of you have used Process Explorer without even realizing it. So that's kind of the tools that you're familiar with. That's what these are going to be. Process Hacker, another efficient GUI tool. It's the same thing. Gives you information about processes. And Ghost Pack Seatbelt, part of a Ghost Pack collection, tool written in C. It's not officially released in binary, blah, 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 therefore you're expecting to compile it yourself. So again, it's a good tool, but they're expecting you to know how to compile it yourself. So it's going to be something that maybe not everybody's going to be familiar with or want to use as much. But these are built-in tools, and then these are two tools that you can download and install yourself. So that's it. That's the conclusion, guys. We did a lot of enumeration with Windows, Linux, and we have previous boxes of Windows and Linux privilege escalation and enumeration. These are just getting general information from boxes, and I think these are really important tools to understand and use. So hopefully you guys like it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the content, and we're going to keep going. We're going to finish this red team path. I don't care how long it takes us. And then we're still doing that competition in November. So I'm super excited about that. We've already been planning it, building it. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of people in the Discord giving me different ideas, tips, tricks that they want to see in it. And, it's just going to be a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend you guys join the Discord because that's where all the information is going to be. I might make a YouTube video about it, but I'm not going to get crazy with it as far as the YouTube part of it. I want people that are in the Discord that have been contributing for a long time to be a part of this. So thanks, guys. I hope you guys have a great day.